Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about a disc that we've all known for quite some time has been coming because it's been available as a download. But I don't talk about just downloads. I want physical product. I want something in the palm of my hand. Here it is. Florence Price, Symphonies 1 and 3. Now, as I discussed in my review of the Naxos recording of Symphony No. 3 plus the Mississippi River, it was a different coupling. Florence Price is very much the flavor of the month. And some people have been saying, well, it's because she was a woman, and it's because she's African American, and that's true. And my response to that is, good for her. I mean, if we had to suffer through 200 years of unknown white male Christian guys doing this stuff and a few Jews thrown in for good measure, then it's her turn, and go for it. That's my feeling. It's her turn. We're going to hear probably lots of dreadful music by women composers and African American composers just because they're women, just because they're African American. And that's just fine as far as I'm concerned, because nobody, as I've said before in talking about this music, I can't stress this enough, this is not a meritocracy, folks. People get in however they get in. They need every bit of help they can get. It's all politics. It's all connections. And if the performing arts military industrial complex has decided that they want to be woke, and that means that they play lots of African American composers or female composers, good. 90% of it will be crap. 10% of it will be fabulous, just like the rest of it has always been. And I want to reiterate that before talking about this. I just think it's very important to realize that. We can't be cynical. I mean, I know maybe I sound cynical because of the way I talked about it. It's not cynical. It's reality. I'm not being cynical. This is life. This is the way things are. And it's neither good or bad. It just is. And sometimes, whether for whatever reason, however they get in there, you get a really fine composer. And let me tell you something. Florence Price was a really fine composer. Partly, of course, her biography is astonishing. It was an amazing story, a very sad story in some respects, a story of neglect. But then again, there are so many composers whose story was one of neglect. Her neglect happened to be because she was female and black. Other people were neglected for whatever other reason they were neglected. Charles Ives was rich and white, and he was neglected. And he was rich. He had money. I mean, it was considered to be crazy. Yanick was neglected everywhere outside of Czechoslovakia because he was just too weird for anyone else to bother with until 50 years later. Mahler was neglected until the 1950s and 60s, except for a couple people. I mean, there's nothing new in neglect either. Nobody has the monopoly on neglect. What matters is that we recognize quality when we hear it. And the reason this new recording is so important is because it is her music, the first and third symphonies, are played by the Philadelphia Orchestra under Yanick Nézet-Séguin. And let me tell you, what a difference it makes. It really does. I don't want to dismiss the recordings on Naxos with John Jeter, and in the third symphony, it was the Vienna Symphony. The first symphony he did with the fourth and the Fort Smith Symphony. But you just can't compare the two. Those were noble efforts and very musical efforts, and they gave you a good sense of what the music purported to be. But if you want to get a sense of how great the music potentially is, time will tell, you have to hear this. You just do, because there's just a world of difference between an orchestra full of top-notch players at every desk and of a big, huge size, the kind of thing that Price could only have imagined, and having a community orchestra or a radio orchestra, even a decent radio orchestra. There's just a world of difference. And in order to understand just how great the music is, it has to be performed and be given a great performance by a great orchestra and a great conductor. It just needs that. And it deserves it. More to the point, one of the things about Price had a wonderful oral imagination, and she really understood right from the get-go that good orchestration depends on how you handle woodwinds. I mean, she often gives her melodic material to the wind section, and she has a kaleidoscopic feeling for color. She switches instruments constantly. And in the for example, the Naxos recording of the First Symphony, it sounds rather disjointed because the players, I just think, aren't up to providing that long singing line, the long lines that the music demands. But of course, here, it's not an issue. And it makes her handling of form, especially in the first movements, sound vastly more persuasive than it previously did. I was iffy on her ability to write a sonata form movement. But now that I've heard this, I'm feeling much better about it. Much, much better. Also, there are amazing moments. The second half of the slow movement of the First Symphony, it's a call and response liturgical piece in a way, and a stylization of African American church music. And you have the hymn played by the brass and then answered by the woodwinds. And then in the second part, that's repeated, but it's repeated with the sound of church bells and light glockenspiel tucked in with woodwind arabesques, the clarinets behind it. It's absolutely magical and completely original. It's fabulous. And, you know, what a difference it makes to have the Philadelphia Orchestra do it. It's just absolutely transcendentally moving, which is, I guess, what she was going for. And she also had a very odd way of handling, or unique way, individual way, I shouldn't say odd, of handling the last two movements of a four-movement cycle. Because in most of her large works, we can now see, now that most of them are available, or a lot of them, and even her chamber works too, one of the movements will be a dance-like scherzo. Usually she calls it a juba dance, which, you know, was a plantation-style dance of the time. And so it was that, and then a short finale, about the same length as the scherzo. Sometimes she calls the finale a scherzo, and the juba dance is the juba dance. And so, you know, I've heard people say that the music is imbalanced because of that. And I don't think so. I think you just add up the last two movements and you get the equivalent of the first in terms of timing. It's not a question of timing. It's a question of proportional relationship of slow to fast and the emotional intensity that's being expressed. I mean, nobody says that the second movement of Shostakovich's 10th Symphony is inadequate because it's only 4 minutes long. That's his portrait of Stalin, of evil run amok. And believe me, 4 minutes is all you need. I mean, so you have to give her a break. And when it comes to those things, you have to hear a great performance to see how it works. Those last movements are deliberately light. They're actually in the style of more, there's 6/8 movements, sort of like an Irish jig. I mean, Haydn wrote lots of finales like that too. And they're, you know, they're definitely lighter in style, but coming after the scherzo, you know, and of a somewhat similar cast, I don't find that there's a lack of balance in the large-scale structure. The other thing that's very interesting about these two symphonies is that they're both in minor keys and they both end in minor keys. She preserves the minor key straight up to the end, so it's not exactly as if this finale, although it's lighter, is happy. It reminds me very much of what Shostakovich said about his love of Jewish music, which he said that you know, the Jewish people were treated so dismally for so long that they learned to express their unhappiness in dance music. Their dance music has a bitter edge. It has a melancholy streak running through it. It's a Slavic thing too, but and you find that here. You definitely find that here, and probably for the same reasons. But these are extraordinary pieces. I recommend them as strongly as I can recommend anything because I really believe that this woman could write. She really, really could write. And what makes it more exciting is that according to the notes, this is going to be the first in a series of her complete orchestral works. There's not a ton of them, but there's a good number. The second symphony doesn't exist. The fourth badly needs a really fine performance that these people can hopefully deliver. And then there's the Mississippi River Suite, and there's a couple concert overtures, and there's some pieces for string orchestra, and a couple other tone poems. There are two called the Oak, or one's called the Oak Tree, but they're apparently different. Her music has now been taken up. It's published by Schirmer, and we can look. She wrote over 300 pieces. Not all of them are extant, but it seems like we're getting it together, and we're rediscovering her, and it's exciting. It's just exciting, and she deserves a place in the repertoire. She is a true American original, and even if she's only a local hero in the United States, chances are she'll do better in Europe than she'll ever do here, given the way we tend to treat our local heroes. That's cynical, but not entirely without reason. I just think it's a very, very special thing. And I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about the rediscovery of the excellent Symphonies 1 and 3 by Florence Price, featuring the Philadelphia Orchestra on Deutsche Grammophon under Yanick Nézet-Séguin. So good for them. Give them the credit where credit is due. Keep on listening, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.